Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It is great to have you here with us today. To understand the gravity of the situation we are facing, we need to look at the choke points of the future and adopt what strategists call the polar view. We need to have a serious conversation about what is really happening behind the headlines. You see, we are looking at the ultimate showdown, Trump versus China and Russia. But this isn't just about trade tariffs or diplomatic words anymore. We are talking about why the year 2026 has become the absolute hard deadline for the United States to secure the 17 elements that make our modern existence and our survival possible. Right now, as we speak, China effectively has the entire American war machine by the throat. Consider the F-35 fighter jets protecting our skies, the Tomahawk cruise missiles in our Navy, the Javelin anti-tank systems, and the guidance chips inside every single smart bomb America drops. What do they all have in common? 90% of the rare earth metals required to build them flow through Chinese processing facilities. That is a stranglehold. But there is a way out. There is a periodic table waiting beneath the ice of Greenland that can make America completely independent from its enemies. Beneath that ice lies the solution to the problems we are facing in the very near future. And here's the bottom line. Donald Trump is willing to pay any price for it, and Denmark is going to have to make a choice. To understand why, you have to stop looking at the map the way you have your whole life. On a standard flat map, Greenland just looks like an icy wasteland way off on the outskirts. But if you look at the globe from the north, everything changes. It is the center of the world. It is the gateway for Russia as nuclear fleet and China as the polar Silk Road. Whoever controls Greenland puts a checkpoint on the main highway of the future. From that vantage point, the world looks very different. Russia, Canada, the United States, Norway, and Greenland, they are all neighbors now. They all share the same ocean, the same shipping lanes, and the same strategic choke points. This is what the planners at the Pentagon call the polar view. In this view, Greenland isn't remote. It is central. It controls access to the Atlantic Ocean for any Russian submarine trying to leave the Northern Fleet. It dominates the flight paths for intercontinental ballistic missiles traveling between Moscow and New York. And it sits right astride what may become the most valuable shipping route of the 21st century, the Northwest Passage. I'm curious. Pause the video for a second and comment below. Before seeing this map, did you ever consider Greenland as the center of the world, or just a vacation spot for polar bears? Be honest, I read every comment. Do you remember back in 2019 when everyone laughed at Donald Trump for suggesting that America should buy Greenland? The Danish Prime Minister called it absurd. The late-night hosts made jokes. The internet was full of memes. Well, nobody's laughing now. Especially not after what we have seen unfold in Venezuela. Because what looked like a random impulse from a real estate developer was actually the first public hint of a grand strategy that has been developing in American security circles for over a decade. It is a strategy with a name that is now circulating in classified briefings all across Washington, Fortress America. Let's look at history for a second. In 2010, when Japan had a diplomatic dispute with Beijing over the Senkaku Islands, China simply turned off the tap. Rare earth exports to Japan dropped by 40% overnight. Tokyo folded within weeks. Now, imagine that same leverage aimed directly at Washington, D.C., but beneath 2 million square kilometers of ice lies the solution to America's most dangerous vulnerability. Greenland is the world's largest island, with a population of only 56,000 people. Yet, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, it is home to one of the planet's most significant untapped deposits of neodymium, dysprosium, and the 17 other elements that make modern warfare possible. Donald Trump wants this. And in the year 2026, he is willing to pay any price to get it. This isn't speculation. This is the documented strategy of a superpower preparing for a new kind of conflict. One fought not just with missiles, but with supply chains. This brings us to the core of the conflict. The 17 specific elements that create a dangerous strategic gap for the United States. Let me break down exactly why these 17 elements could determine who wins the next great power war. First, let's talk about neodymium. Without it, you cannot build the permanent magnets that power precision-guided munitions. We are talking about every Hellfire missile, every JDAM bomb, and every targeting system in the United States arsenal. Then there is dysprosium. This is critical for the magnets in electric vehicle motors, and, crucially, in the flight control systems of the F-35. Then you have terbium, used in solid-state electronics, including our military communications equipment. Here's the reality that no American president has wanted to admit publicly for years. China does not just mine these elements. They have spent 3 decades building an absolute monopoly over the entire processing chain, from the ore, to the oxide, to the metal, to the magnet. Beijing controls it all. In the year 2023, China processed 90% of the world's rare earths. This wasn't because they have the only deposits. It is because they made a strategic decision back in the 1990s. While America was distracted by the end of history fantasy, thinking the Cold War was over forever, China decided to dominate this sector at any cost. They subsidized production, they tolerated environmental devastation, and they systematically undercut every competitor until they owned the market. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think American leaders were just asleep at the wheel letting this happen? Or was this a failure of the free market against a state-run economy? Let me know who you think is to blame in the comments below. Deng Xiaoping said it clearly in 1992. The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. Now, look at Greenland again. The Kvanefjeld project in southern Greenland contains an estimated 619 million tons of ore. That is enough rare earth oxide to supply global demand for 150 years. The Greenland deposit nearby holds the world's largest known accumulation of neodymium and dysprosium. These aren't just guesses. This is verified geological data from Australian, Canadian, and American surveys. The minerals are there. They have always been there. What has changed is that climate change is making them accessible and great power competition is making them essential. And China knows this too. In 2016, a Chinese state-owned company tried to buy an abandoned Danish naval base in Greenland. It was blocked. In 2018, Beijing offered to build 3 international airports on the island. That was blocked after intense pressure from Washington. In 2019, a Chinese mining consortium sought majority control of the Kvanefjeld project. The Danish intelligence service intervened. Trump said it himself. If we don't do it, Russia or China will. This isn't paranoia. This is an accurate threat assessment. And it explains why Trump has moved from let's buy Greenland to we are taking Greenland one way or another. The calculus is simple. Whoever controls Greenland's deposits can break China's monopoly. Not in 20 years, not in 10 years, but in the time it takes to build processing facilities. 3 to 5 years with wartime urgency. That is not a trade deal. That is a strategic realignment of global power. Now, let's talk about what keeps NATO's Supreme Allied Commander awake at night. It is called the GIUK Gap. That stands for Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. It is a naval choke point that has controlled Atlantic warfare since World War II. Any Russian submarine heading from the Northern Fleet to threaten American or European coastlines must pass through this gap. During the Cold War, the United States invested billions in sonar arrays, patrol aircraft, and submarine hunter-killers specifically to monitor this gap. The Soviet Navy knew that breaking through the GIUK Gap was the first step in any war with NATO. That infrastructure has degraded since 1991, but the geography hasn't changed, and Russia's submarine capabilities have evolved dramatically. The Yasen-class nuclear attack submarine carries caliber cruise missiles with a range of 2,500 kilometers. Russia has deployed at least 8 of them to the Northern Fleet. Even more concerning is the Status 6 Poseidon. This is an autonomous, nuclear-armed torpedo designed to detonate near coastal cities and generate radioactive tsunamis. These weapons are specifically designed to bypass American missile defense, and they all must transit through or near the GIUK Gap to reach their targets. The United States already operates Patuxent Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, in northwest Greenland. It hosts early warning radars and satellite tracking systems. But that alone isn't enough. That only covers the northern approaches. What about the southern route through the Denmark Strait? If America controlled Greenland outright or had unrestricted military access, it could establish a complete sensor network across the entire GIUK barrier. We are talking anti-submarine warfare aircraft at Kangerlussuaq and underwater sonar arrays from Nuuk to the Davis Strait. It would create a tripwire that would make any Russian submarine transit a suicide mission. All of these factors are converging toward a critical deadline that will define the new world order. Trump's advisors understand this perfectly. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has emphasized Arctic dominance as a top priority. The recently announced $6 billion Danish investment in F-35s and P-8 Poseidon aircraft for Greenland, that came directly from American pressure. It is essentially a down payment on the defense commitment Washington is demanding. But there is a strategic irony here that most analysts miss. The United States already has everything it technically needs in Greenland. The 1951 defense agreement with Denmark allows American forces to build facilities, conduct operations, and expand their presence essentially without restriction. Denmark has never refused a U.S. military request regarding Greenland, so why does Trump want sovereignty? Why the push for ownership? There are 2 reasons. First, speed. Negotiating new facilities takes years. Ownership means acting immediately. This is critical if a Taiwan crisis or a European war suddenly made Arctic dominance urgent. Second, permanence. Agreements can be revoked. Territory is forever. Trump isn't planning for the next administration. He is planning for the next century. Here is where I need you to think like a strategist, not a moralist. Look at the context of 2026. On January 3, 2026, U.S. forces seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a lightning operation. He is now in a New York detention facility facing drug trafficking charges. The Venezuelan military is now operating under American direction, renegotiating oil contracts. Trump didn't remove Maduro to restore democracy. He removed him to redirect the oil flow away from China. Now connect the dots. China's strategic vulnerability isn't military, it is energy. The People's Republic imports over 70% of its oil. If the United States controls Greenland's rare earths, it breaks China's mineral leverage. If the United States controls Venezuelan oil, it breaks one of China's energy lifelines. This is Fortress America. It is not isolation, it is domination. It is a strategic posture where the United States controls enough critical resources to be invulnerable to economic coercion while retaining the ability to strangle any adversary economically. So, how does America actually get Greenland? Let me walk you through the scenarios being discussed in Washington and Copenhagen right now. Option 1 is the 99-year lease. This isn't a purchase. It is a long-term arrangement similar to Britain's tenure in Hong Kong. The United States would pay Denmark an annual fee. Proposals range from $10 to $50 billion annually in exchange for complete administrative control. Option 2 is independence followed by association. Greenland has been trending toward independence for decades. A 2025 poll showed 67% support for eventual sovereignty. What if Trump simply accelerated that process? Greenland becomes a sovereign nation and immediately signs a compact of free association with the United States. Under this deal, Greenland controls internal affairs, while the U.S. handles defense, foreign policy, and crucially, resource extraction. Then there is option 3, the fait accompli. This is the scenario that terrifies European planners. Trump announces an imminent threat to Greenland, perhaps citing Chinese mining interests or Russian naval activity. American forces deploy to protect critical infrastructure. Within days, boots are on the ground. Denmark faces an impossible choice: fight its own NATO ally or accept a reality it cannot change. European allies have made it clear this would end NATO. But Trump's response has been equally clear. America needs NATO less than NATO needs America. This is the hard question I have for you guys today. If it comes down to a choice between preserving NATO feelings or securing American survival, which way should Trump go? Type alliance or America first in the comments. I really want to see where this community stands. Here is what I need you to understand about why this matters beyond Greenland. When the United States seizes a foreign head of state and openly contemplates annexing Allied territory, it sends a signal to every other power watching. Putin looks at Venezuela and thinks, America just did what I did in Crimea. Xi Jinping looks at Greenland and thinks, if territory can be taken from NATO allies without consequence, what stops us in Taiwan? The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average. Sea routes that were impassable for millennia will be open year-round within decades. Resources locked under ice for millions of years are becoming accessible. Whoever controls the Arctic controls the 21st century. That is not hyperbole. That is geography. That is geology. Donald Trump sees this clearly. His methods are brutal, and his rhetoric is inflammatory. But the underlying calculation, that Greenland is the capstone of American strategic dominance for the next 100 years, is shared by planners across the political spectrum. The question isn't whether America should want Greenland. The question is what America and the world are willing to sacrifice to get it. The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths. America will have Greenland. That is the lesson of 2026. But this story doesn't end in 2026. In fact, that is just the beginning of a much larger, darker chapter in human history. You need to realize that acquiring Greenland is not simply about building more missiles or securing the borders. It is about the fundamental architecture of the global economy for the next 50 years. It is the final nail in the coffin of globalization as we know it. We are witnessing the birth of a bifurcated world, a great decoupling where the planet is split into 2 distinct competing operating systems. On one side, you have the Fortress America sphere, the Western Hemisphere, the Arctic, and select allies, completely self-sufficient in energy, food, and technology. On the other side, you have the Eurasian bloc, led by China and Russia, desperate for resources, and increasingly isolated from the markets that built their wealth. Think about the technology that is going to define your life in the next decade. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and the green energy transition. None of these things run on code alone, they run on hardware. And that hardware runs on the very elements sitting beneath the Greenland ice sheet. If China controls the minerals, they don't just control the price of your iPhone. They control the development of the artificial intelligence that will run your banking system, your hospitals, and your power grid. This is the tech war that nobody discusses. We talk about a trade war, but the reality is an existential race for the physical building blocks of the future. By securing Greenland, the United States is ensuring that the Silicon Valley of the future does not have to beg Beijing for permission to exist. But what does this mean for you, the average American sitting at home? It means the era of cheap goods is over. The era of just-in-time supply chains is dead. We are moving into an era of just-in-case resilience. You are going to see a massive reindustrialization of the American heartland, not because politicians promised it, but because national security demands it. We will see processing plants for these rare earths popping up in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, protected by the same level of security as our nuclear silos. This is the return of the war economy, but in peacetime. It means jobs, yes, but it also means inflation and a world that is far more dangerous. The polite fictions of international law are being replaced by the raw reality of resource mercantilism. The European allies are already panicking because they see the writing on the wall. They realize that in this new world, if you cannot defend your own resources, you are not a partner. You are a vassal. And America is no longer interested in subsidizing the security of nations that refuse to pay their bills. So, as you watch the headlines in the coming months, don't be distracted by the political theater in Washington. Keep your eyes on the north. Watch the ice. Watch the shipping lanes. Because the map is being redrawn in real time. The acquisition of Greenland is the signal that the United States is done playing by the old rules. We are entering a period of aggressive, unapologetic American dominance, fueled by the most valuable dirt on the planet. History is moving fast, my friends. The chessboard has been flipped. And for the first time in a long time, America is playing to win, no matter the cost. Make sure you are prepared for what comes next. Thanks for watching.